Stacy has a question. What are the top qualities, some of the top qualities top sales performers have, and how can you look for those in the interview process?
Yeah. So we'll start with saying interviewing is hard.
Yes.
Interviewing is very hard because you're trying to, in a very short window of time, get a deep understanding as to how somebody would behave both in the role and in your company. And so you're talking about like cultural alignment, and you're talking about role alignment. And then underneath it all is who they are as a human being, like who they are as a person, what they care about, how they grew up and the way they think and what they're motivated by and their experiences, and how like it's all of this, like it all boils down to human relationships, right? It's like it's people to people, but you're trying to assess all of that in a relatively short interview process and make a decision on whether or not somebody is a fit for you and if your company is a fit for them. So from a sales standpoint, I struggled with this for a long time early on in my career, and then stumbled across some advice from a leader, I think it was an AVP at Salesforce, who had neatly bucketed their interview process, and it was the teachables and the non-teachables. It's like the things that people list on their resume, the teachables, like how they forecast, how they follow up on leads, the sales methodologies they've been taught, the process they've used, how they go about their prospecting. Like those are all the things, those are all the learned experiences that a salesperson picks up through their career. And it's different depending on where you've worked and what you've done. And then there are the unteachables, or the things that are really, really, really hard to teach or change. And so those are like the intrinsic characteristics of somebody: their drive, their self-awareness, their curiosity, their resiliency, things that you can argue whether it's nature or nurture, but it's kind of who you are at your core as a person. And so the recommendation from this specific leader at Salesforce was like, you need to understand both. But I spend all of my time in my interviews interviewing for who somebody is as a person. So the intrinsic characteristics, because that has become a much stronger barometer for sales success, because it's one of these things. It's really hard to be successful in sales if you don't have a natural curiosity. Like if you're not one to ask questions or wonder what somebody else is dealing with on the other side of the table. Like it's not about features and benefits and bells and whistles. It's about what is that person's major problem that they're trying to potentially solve with the product or service that you offer. And if that's forced, if that's not inherent to somebody, that's really hard to coach and train. Either have that or you don't, or there's some sort of middle spectrum. And so it's a really important characteristic. Another important characteristic, especially in sales, where it can be highs and lows by week, by month, by quarter, depending on performance, is you've got to be resilient. You have to have that internal grit to be able to bounce back from a loss, bounce back from a missed month, bounce back from a bad quarter, and have the self-awareness to work with your manager and assess on like what happened, what went wrong, and how do you address it? What are the actions you can take to address it? And I think having the confidence, having the awareness, having the ability to do that diagnosis, to dive in, and then to want to go through it, to want to take on that challenge and kind of get yourself to the other side of it, really important. Like in a hyper-growth company, this is now your second, like you know that feeling. Like you got to have resilient people throughout the organization who can handle the highs and lows and everything that happens with the constant change management that the organization is under. And so in sales, that's really important, because they're feeling, if you're a salesperson, you're feeling that all the time. So I think, as what makes a great salesperson, there's a list of the 7 characteristics. Let's see if I can rattle them off the top of my head. Seven.
Okay.
Yeah, 7 specific.
Here we go.
It's drive, it's curiosity, it's resiliency, it's self-awareness, emotional intelligence, problem solving. I knew I was going to miss one. I'm short on one, but there's another one. Integrity. Integrity is the last one. Sorry, that was the last
That's
one.
a good one.
Those 7. Those are the 7 that I interview for. And so it's that you don't ask somebody like, do you have integrity? You ask questions around some of their behaviors. Like, can you tell me about a time where you had a challenge with one of your peers? Like in sales, sometimes there'll be an argument over a deal or who owns the rights to it. And just like, talk me through that. Talk me through how you work through that process. And you want to hear, like, are they pointing fingers saying, well, they did this thing that was absolutely wrong and there was no reason for them to do it? Or was it more objective? And like, I learned about how they got access to it, and I told them about how I got access to it. And, we talked about who did the work and why we did the work. It's like, you want to hear their line of thinking and how they got to a resolution or didn't get to a resolution. And then you can kind of check off like, all right, there's the right level of integrity. They know how to handle a challenge with a peer, and they'll go about it the right way. And if they're put in one of those situations, I feel like I have a good read on how they're going to handle it. So I have lists of questions that I ask that are associated with each of those specific characteristics.
You and I are alike, because what I say is you hire for character, train for skill.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally.
I've been preaching that since I learned that probably 7 years ago.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's you're absolutely right, because there are, you can teach people to do a lot of things. You bring in a smart, hardworking, resilient person, and you can teach them to do a lot of great things.
100%.
They just have to want it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because if they don't want it, they're not even going to want to learn then.
Totally.
So it's like, then you can't even coach them.
Yeah.